Hello. Just want to make sure I'm heard. I think everything's okay. Great. Hi. Thank you for joining. My name is Jean Amato, and I'm an associate professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology as part of SUNY, of course. And my presentation is encouraging collaborative global discourse and translanguaging research practices in online literature and film studies classes. So I'm going to be covering a lot. So in this presentation, I've embedded quite a few links that might be helpful. I'm going to take off my earphone. Sorry, the echo's too annoying. And so I afterwards, if anyone's interested in the slides, I'm happy to share them because it includes a lot of links and resources. So the beginning of this, I'll first start off talking about some projects we've done at FIT on translanguaging in the classroom. And a few years back, I gave a talk on using translanguaging techniques in the classroom in a safe, user-friendly, collaborative scenario amongst colleagues at FIT to encourage more and more faculty to have our students turn to their own rich language sources and embed and enrich their assignments, and also bring a more global, inclusive discourse into every classroom. And so that led to more projects that I will show in a minute. And but first, let me talk a little bit more about why translanguaging is so useful in the online classroom, especially. Part of it is that in online, we rely more heavily, in liberal arts at least, in a lot of discussion forums. And so the loosening of the teacher-student binary is already there. And what I'm trying to do in my classes and amongst our colleagues at FIT is to loosen monolingual academic hierarchies and to show that English and one's native languages are complementary. We're not replacing English, but we're encouraging our students to bring in rich sources from their own cultural or linguistic backgrounds. And so, for example, a student will bring in an interview that is not translated and translate one of the two of the ideas and embed it into their homework or presentation. I'll get to examples later. It allows for natural inclusion and agency for non-native speakers. It also expands the wealth of students who are monolingual, and so it helps increase one's ability to tap into their own narratives and multimodal ways of scaffolding and telling stories, and for in particular for writing courses. It allows students to hear multiple viewpoints and simultaneous ideas that are global. And the way that I approach it is that I build in a lot of very flexible, low-risk assignments that encourage students, don't require them to tap into it. And I'll show you some examples of that. And again, it's built into scaffolding. And from the very beginning, I always provide students with a quick tutorial on how to cite in languages other than English, and I give some sample assignments, and I do a lot of group work. So let me keep going here. Okay, so, and I have a Spark that I made that might be useful. Let me see if I share this, if it's going to show. Okay, wait. I guess I should click on this. 1 second, sorry. Okay, hopefully that'll work. Yeah, I think it's sharing. So let me see here. It's taking a while to load. If it doesn't load, I will just go, okay, there. So this is a presentation that is filled with oh, it's not showing. Okay, sorry. 1 second. I think I have to, I'm going to leave this for now because it's not that important, but I encourage any of you that are interested to take a look at that Spark because it has a lot of material that may be useful. But I have a lot more here to talk about, so I'll just keep moving. So this is also we're doing a series of forums where we're inviting guest speakers and also inviting our own faculty members on how to use. We're bringing in experts on translanguaging, but we're also inviting faculty from across the college to share best practices and questions and even anxieties and fears, because I think there's a scenario where some faculty feel quite uncomfortable bringing this into their classroom, and so what we did in this particular one was really look at tools to empower all educators to incorporate translanguaging into the classroom. And I'm not going to be doing too much here explaining the theory of translanguaging, because I just want to cover more the basic techniques to use online. That's why I'm embedding a lot of links here for anyone interested. You can dig in deeper. There's a lot on this Spark page that I have. There's a lot of video tutorials, real basic introduction to translanguaging theory and how to use it in the college classroom in particular, because most research has been used in K through 12, not college classrooms. So let me move on here. Okay, so some ways that I foster inclusion and globalism and pluralism through not just translanguaging, but collaborative activities. Every unit that I do for my online cinema class or my online literature classes, I always have a Spark page that is like a mini lecture. I often give a mini lecture and a Spark page on how to do this, and I have a link for students that they can go to and see how to cite in other languages. And I also provide samples for students to see. In every discussion thread, I always have sample assignments, and I always make sure that sample assignments always include one or two from previous students that have used a little bit of translanguaging, even if they just translate one term or talk about, for example, Hamlet in a Korean adaptation, just little indicators that it's safe to do this and to bring it in. I also do a lot of icebreakers and group work. For example, I teach a course online called Introduction to Chinese Literature. And right now, I do work in Chinese, by the way. I have about half of my students are Chinese, able to read and speak Chinese, and half are from all over the globe. So it started to be that students were getting intimidated if they didn't know Chinese, even though everything is in English. So I started setting up group works and translation games that would encourage the Chinese speaking students to work with the non-Chinese speaking students and collaborate and look at language and translation. I'll jump down and show you some examples of that, because I'm not going to talk too much about that. But here's some examples where you see, let's see, am I showing? Yeah, okay. Where you can see, and again, I'll share this slide because it's really hard to see a lot of this, where students are, here's on the left is an example of a thread, an example post. So students see this before they post, and then they feel safe doing something. So students who have the ability to use a language will bring it in, cite it properly, and bring that into the course. Here's an example from another course that I teach, East Asian Cinema, and this is a student who, every homework, they're given a list of about 30 question prompts. They can pick whatever they want. And then they are to find one quote from one of the readings that are in English. But they can also supplement a quote from something not in English. So here's an example of a student who's doing that, who's going to find more information, more contemporary, more rich, and bringing that into the assignment. And the way that I scaffold our weekly work is students have to, they come in every week having read and quoted from the readings, and then they have something to present to the class informally, and we do kind of around the circle so everyone has a chance, if they want to speak or respond to each other. So that's one of the methods I use. By allowing a lot of flexibility, it also encourages students from, because we're a design school and a business school. For example, in a film class, I may have students who know photography, students who are film students, students who are Korean and understand the cultural context of a film, students who are illustration. And so they're all bringing into the conversation their own richness and background. So everyone is providing and teaching each other. In particular, students who are native speakers, for example, if I'm doing a Brazilian martial arts film, there may be one or two students who have Brazilian background, and or they have visited, and so they may incorporate that into it, or a student who wants to discuss and present on an Israeli martial arts film. So there, by allowing for a lot of flexibility, but having strict parameters about what the requirements are, the students are teaching each other, bringing globalism into the classroom. So let me keep going here. So another way that I do this in all of my classes is I try to get students thinking about ideas of unpacking the loaded nature of questions like, where are you from? And using tech tools like just simple things like Padlet, or a heavy Spark user, for example. And so students might think about the question in a literature class about home and homeland. So they may do some readings, and then some of the discussion questions. The assignment will also have a short little Padlet where they're asked to think about what home means to them, and then we'll have a discussion. A resource that's quite helpful is for example, in my Asian American literature and history class, I use Urban Archive's interactive map that allows, let's see, yeah, you can see it here. Students can type in any address, and then they can find the history of that location, so they can really interact with the idea of home and where they are right now. Another, again, students have flexibility. In a course, immigration literature, I have an array of choices. So the students might pick something more interesting to them, and then they will answer a question, and then they'll also go to do this Padlet assignment, which I'll talk about in a minute. Sorry, I'm not very linear here. Before I do an assignment on home and homeland and mapping, I also have students look at examples of how people visualize where they are and where they're located and where they are from. And I like to rely on tools such as the City Labs project that invited people to draw a map of their experience during COVID. And so you get maps of time, of space, of emotion, of feeling, of texture, of digital mapping, how being in front of the computer opens up a world. So this project gets students thinking about where they are in the world and where they're from and where they are at the moment and how they make home all the time. But I'm a big user of Padlet, and Padlet has a map feature. And as I showed earlier here, I use Padlet for almost every assignment. And links, and that way students, particularly from my film classes, they can grab screenshots and share ideas, or make, if they prefer, they want to make a quick audio or video recording rather than written. Again, another way to express their ideas. So this tool for Padlet, by allowing students to play around with Padlet and building it into an assignment, they can start to share where they're from, and they can share how they see home, and breaking out of binaries and boxes and definitions. allowing them to sort of connect with each other in a safe, no pressure assignment that has a fun aspect to it that is just built into a literary assignment. So they're always matched with something where they still are doing critical thinking. It's not just having fun, although it is kind of fun, I must admit. Okay, so let me go down here. So here's an example of how that worked out, and they can and I show them how to make a video showing them how to use this. Is quite simple, and they can unpack each story here on the side if they want to learn more. And they start to realize that many of them are from many different places, and that home is always shifting and changing. Here's an example a student posted about feeling at home in JFK Airport, right? And here's one about feeling at home in transit. So these are just one examples. Another unit I like to do in my literature course is to build on a diversity grant we did about, oh my goodness, about 15 years ago at FIT. And that has readings and assignments that relate to food and culture through literature. But then in addition to a written response, they are also asked to post a family recipe and tell a story. And so they're quite fun and interactive. And it also allows students to bring in their own languages, bring in their own culture, yet it invites them to bring the readings and the literature and the history to life. So these are just some examples of that. This also works beautifully with a composition class, by the way. Some students, because translanguage and and these interactive assignments are built into the course, a lot of students get quite interested in the idea of language and power and identity. Here's an example of a student's presentation on that topic. And this student interviewed other students on campus about how they feel about losing the ability to speak their native language and why their relationship with their native languages. And one of the questions was, if you could say anything to your ancestors in your mother tongue, what would you say? It was a very powerful, beautiful presentation. Another example is in my global martial arts cinema class. Some of my students realized that the other students didn't understand some core concepts and they weren't translatable. So a group of students made a project on wuxia films and woman warriors, which is a big part of one of our units, and translated some of the very untranslatable concepts in their presentation. So these are just some examples of what happens from idea into into sort of all the way to the practice. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen and then share a video. So hopefully this will work. Let me see. Okay, and then I'm going to try to share. Hopefully I can do this. Chrome tab. And this is a, hopefully it'll work before let's see. Okay, we'll see if this works. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Okay, so this is from a presentation I did on my global martial arts class, which is a really, let's see if I open it up. There we go. Okay, it's a course that allows for a lot of interplay and students learning and interacting with each other just by its nature. I mean, unit is called Everything is Remix, Assassin Ninja Juxtapositions. So I'm going to start and play just a couple pieces of this. Hopefully it'll work. If not, I'll just do this manually. Some of the key ones. So we start off with sort of an intro where the emphasis here is setting up some core ideas of the genre itself, which of course was originally from China. So in that unit, we look at early films. We introduce some core values, and what is emphasis the most here is the idea of the woman warrior and showing early clips. The students can also explore on their own of the female hero, which was, contrary to many people in the West, was there all along, which was, quite unknown. And if you look at some of the responses from students that brought about, you can see students were interested in choreography, how that was different. They're interested in the roots of the Mulan story, for example. Students are, going into different directions. And I'm going to move very quickly to show you some of this. So the next unit is a unit that sort of gets right out to the question of everything mixing and flowing between borders and boundaries and genres. And the question of, cultural appropriation, montage, where is the director really like a DJ? We do this in a few units, but this sort of sets the stage up. Usually we go with Kill Bill, but students also explore this idea in many different directions. And in that area, recently in the post Me Too environment, there's been students are much more interested in some of the debates around Tarantino and gender roles. So that arises even more interesting discussion. Here's an example of what a homework sheet would look like. There'll be a shared viewing, which sets the base for everyone, and then students choose a reading depending on what they're interested in. Again, because we have students coming in from all backgrounds, some who are film students, some who have no background in film, some who have no exposure to anything related to Chinese cinema or martial arts, and so they have a lot of range of where they could go. They could go filmic, they could go thematic, they could go contextual design and such. Okay, so and here's an example of some responses. The idea of Tarantino is, as DJ, the idea of representation of violence and the women in the film. Let me get out of here. The next unit, which I'm not going to spend much time on, it's pretty more standard. It sets up, this unit allows for me the space to introduce core concepts of the genre itself. And the idea is to look at Wong Fei Hong and Ip Warrior, Ang Lee, and we look at the tracing King Hu to Ang Lee. We do a lot of time on King Hu and the influence and turn back towards more tradition. But we also then get a chance to look at, for example, choreography and explore the concepts of the Jianghu. So in here, students in this unit, it really is it depends again on what their interests are. But in this unit, what you'll see arising is, for example, who that it is full action hero mixed martial arts unit, and then we do on a female action star, and in that one they get a choice of many options. They can also pick a film not mentioned. They watch it on their own. They bring in a clip, and then they pick a reading where they have different options, as you can see, and then they may go into many different directions. And again, it kind of ties us back to the roots of the woman warrior at the beginning of the semester. A nice circle. Gendered orientation. Are the women empowered in these revenge, or is there still an objectification or fetishization of the female action characters? Where does love, sex, and romance come in? Are the film women moving out of the sort of stasis, domestic space, into movement and mobility, and what does that entail? A lot of students really enjoyed this unit. Some got into choreography, cinematography. Some looked at characters such as Foxy Brown, La Femme Nikita, and violence and revenge. A lot of students like to talk about Marvel heroines. That's a real new trend that's popular. And you can see the range here. And also, do they really subvert gender roles, or are they still being reproduced? And how, at what level are things going here? To
This should
just
give you a
let
sense
me
of
mute
why
this
I
and show
believe
you something else here. So the idea too is to allow
defeating the
for
collections.
a lot of every
More
student has to
in
watch the same
contrast
movie,
to
but then there
cultural
is an allowance to
and
bring
gender.
in other.
So much more interested in.
Yeah, I guess I'll stop this. Okay, there's an allowance to bringing into other. Sorry, I'm not good at multitasking. To bring in other examples of films, like for example, when we do the samurai western, we also look at some Korean, Japanese, and mishmash films that are playing with genres and playing with the samurai and the western together, contemporary. So there's a lot of decentering on the West also in a lot of these units and how they're set up. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions, or if anyone wants me to share any resources, I'm happy to do so. And I apologize, I tried to cover a lot here, but I would most importantly, I would encourage looking at that Spark on translanguaging that is in the slide. I will go ahead and put them in the chat for people in case there's any. Let's see if I can do that. Here's one. I'm not sure I'm putting this in the right place. Okay, let's see. Form, there we go. Okay, and I'll put a few more in here. This is City Lab. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's probably the best one to put in, unless anything else. But I would start with that one. The key point here is that what I'm trying to do is to create a scenario where there's a clear assignment, the literature or the film, and then things around the film, bringing one quote, writing a response, and then embellishing, if one wants to, with resources from one's own language. And that becomes quite strong, particularly in the online environment, because the students are really interacting with each other and sharing resources. And a lot of even when I make presentation Spark pages, I will intentionally include a lot of interview clips that are not translated, so that the students who have access to those languages can still sources. And I often share my own research and also really encourage. Okay, I'm all set. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope some of these resources will be of use to some of you.